Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. We've just spent some time digging through everything from the F1 America Grand Prix 2025 at COTA.
Yep.
And we're ready to really unpack this one. It felt, more complex strategically than maybe the final result looks on paper.
Oh, absolutely. We saw some really tense fights out there, didn't we? Championship stuff shifting around. And maybe most importantly, a big philosophical change brewing at one of the top teams.
COTA always needs that second look, doesn't it? The track itself is just so unique.
It really is.
Yeah.
And you throw in the championship pressure and suddenly every little detail, every strategy call, it just gets magnified.
So our mission today, as always, is to get beyond just who stood on the podium. We really want to focus on how the drivers performed, those crucial tire choices, and what this sudden Red Bull kind of resurgence actually means for McLaren's title hopes.
That's the core of it, yeah. Execution, strategy, and the bigger picture.
Let's kick off with just first impressions, maybe a quick score and that track factor. For me, honestly, I really enjoyed it. The whole Leclerc versus Norris battle, that tension, and then thinking about the strategy underneath, I'm giving it a solid 8 out of 10. It kept me hooked, even if, well, the winner felt a bit inevitable towards the end.
See, I went a bit lower, more calculated maybe, 7.6 out of 10.
Specific, 0.6.
Yeah, and that 0.6 matters. Look, the fights for P2, P3, absolutely top-notch, really good racing there. But after maybe the first 15 laps or so, there wasn't much doubt about P1, was there? And that just holds it back from being like a 9 or a 10 for me.
Fair point. But you mentioned COTA being the X factor. Let's talk about that, those bumps.
The infamous bumps.
Yeah.
We call them micro bumps, right?
Yeah.
Even though they've resurfaced parts, it feels like this track always messes with the setup. You have to compromise on ride height, worry about the floor.
It's the absolute foundation of every single setup conversation they have at COTA. You're spot on. It's not just like big curbs you can see easily. It's these constant little ups and downs, these undulations. And for these modern ground effect cars, which are super sensitive to ride height, it's a killer. Teams have to lift the car, run it higher than they'd ideally want, just to avoid, smashing the floor to bits.
And lifting the car, just for anyone listening who isn't maybe deep in the aero weeds, that means losing speed, right? Losing performance.
Precisely. Loads of it, potentially.
Yeah.
These cars work by sucking themselves to the ground, creating downforce underneath.
Ground effect.
Exactly. The lower you run, the better that suction, the more downforce you get. So when you have to raise it up to clear those micro bumps, you lose that seal with the track. Aerodynamic performance just drops off. And then there's the other big worry, the plank.
Yes, the plank. That regulated bit of wood, well, composite now underneath. Why is that such a headache here specifically?
Because it's the wear limit. It's a mandatory skid block, basically, to stop teams running ridiculously low. If that plank wears down too much beyond the legal thickness limit by the end of the race, you're disqualified. Simple as that. And COTA, with all those constant little bumps and scrapes, managing the ride height to protect that plank, but without giving up too much lap time, it's just this incredibly fine line. A knife-edge decision, really.
So the theoretically fastest setup might just be impossible to actually run here.
Often, yeah. That constant compromise means you see these weird performance swings sometimes. It explains why some cars, maybe like the McLarens, which really rely on clean airflow under the floor, seem to be fighting the setup a bit all weekend. It's all tied back to those bumps.
Okay, that sets the scene nicely. Let's use that and jump straight into the race start, because that was where Charles Leclerc made his big move.
The soft tire gamble.
Exactly. Started P3, but bolted on the softs. Huge call. And it worked instantly, didn't it? Got him past Norris for P2 right off the line.
Classic high risk, high reward. Those softs just give you maximum grip right away, perfect for the launch and that short uphill run to turn one. Lando Norris, starting P2, he was on the mediums, just couldn't match that initial bite off the line.
And we also saw Norris got a little bit boxed in behind Verstappen too, didn't he? That probably didn't help his momentum.
Yeah, that definitely contributed. Stalled him just for a fraction of a second, and Leclerc was already slicing past on the outside. He used that tire advantage perfectly in the first few corners, stayed right with Verstappen initially.
But that early action wasn't just at the very front. Further back, we got that virtual safety car pretty quickly. Sainz and Antonelli tangling at turn 14.
Turn 14 always delivers drama. And yeah, that contact, frankly, it just seemed unnecessary.
Looked clumsy.
Very clumsy. If you look at the lines, the data, Sainz was, I'd say, 100% at fault there.
Really? That clear cut.
I think so. He just threw it up the inside, trying to force open a door that just wasn't there. Super optimistic lunge. No real chance of making that stick cleanly, and it just wrecked Antonelli's race, too.
And Antonelli wasn't shy about saying so on the radio, was he? The 19-year-old calling Sainz a veteran an idiot.
Huh. Yeah, the emotion was raw there. You can understand the frustration, right? From Antonelli's cockpit, it must have looked like a completely brainless move. Lacked respect for the space, definitely.
Shows the pressure, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably poor judgment from Sainz so early in the race. Okay, let's shift focus back up front, though, because the real heart of the race, for me anyway, was that battle between Leclerc and Norris.
The fight for second, yeah, that was mega.
Leclerc's defense, it went on for, what, nearly 15 laps? Just masterful.
It really was. He was driving so well, keeping Norris behind on tires that, honestly, everyone thought would just fall apart much, much sooner.
Totally. Cold-blooded defense against a car that, let's be honest, looked quicker. How did he do it? What were the specifics, the techniques he was using?
It was all about car placement, and believe it or not, trusting those degrading softs. We saw two main things. First, coming into that sequence from turn 12 to 15, that faster section, he kept putting the Ferrari right down the middle of the track, not just blocking the inside line, but proper central positioning.
So making Norris take the awkward route.
Exactly. It denied Norris the easy conventional line, but crucially, it also made the entry into the next corner, like turn 13, really compromised for the attacker. He was forcing Norris to constantly rethink his approach.
Smart. Proactive defending.
And the second bit, which is maybe more technical, was how he shut down the switchback attempt.
Ah, the old switchback. Explain that quickly for our listeners.
Sure. It's where the attacking car deliberately runs a bit wide at the entry of one corner, maybe misses the apex slightly, to get a much better angle and speed to cut back underneath the defender on the exit of the next corner. It punishes a driver who defends the inside too hard on the first part.
Gotcha. So how did Leclerc stop Norris doing that?
By using that central track position again. Because he wasn't hugging the absolute inside curb too tightly going into turn 12, he didn't give Norris enough space or the right angle to really execute that wide entry needed for a good switch back into 13. Norris tried it. You saw him run wide once or twice, but Leclerc saw it coming, stayed central, and just closed the door perfectly on the exit. And he had to trust those soft tires, even braking slightly offline sometimes. That trust kept him ahead.
And that duration on the softs, truly surprising. He went all the way to lap 22 before pitting.
22 laps, yeah.
Meanwhile, Norris on the mediums, he didn't pit until lap 33. That long stint from Leclerc must have given other teams a bit of hope, right? Maybe degradation wasn't as bad as predicted.
It definitely skewed the data a bit, offered that hope, as you say. Ferrari played it really well, actually. The goal wasn't just P2 at the start. It was forcing Norris to use up his medium tires trying to get past.
Make him burn rubber fighting.
Exactly.
Yeah,
there was that weird note in one source about Leclerc losing a couple of seconds to Hamilton on the pit entry.
I saw that too. Odd.
Very odd. But ultimately, it didn't really change anything for his race. That long first stint bought him track position, later on fresh mediums, kept him clear of the cars behind, and basically locked down that modium. Smart strategy from Ferrari.
Okay, let's flip the coin now. McLaren. Norris. Even though he was stuck behind Leclerc for all that time, he seemed incredibly patient.
Yeah, impressively cool-headed. He knew it was a long race.
Recognized the long game, didn't he? Showed real maturity, clinical execution later on.
That patience, that's the sign of a driver really operating at the top level, isn't it? He knew the McLaren, once it got into clear air, probably had the edge on pace. So the last thing he wanted was some clumsy lunge that wrecked his own tires, or worse, damaged that sensitive floor on the COTA bumps. Had to manage everything.
And what about that mid-race radio message? Around laps 26 to 30, he suddenly pipes up saying his tires are finished.
Yeah, the classic radio message. We were talking about this. The F1 movie moment, right. Driver sounds beaten, then finds pace.
Exactly. Was it just a bluff trying to lull Leclerc into a false sense of security? Or was it actually strategic, like cooling the tires?
Could be a bit of both, honestly. If it was a bluff, it was timed perfectly. But strategically, it makes sense, too. He was probably feeling the tires starting to overheat from running close behind Leclerc.
Right, dirty air and pushing hard.
Yeah. So backing off just a tenth or two for a couple of laps, letting the surface temperature drop back into that ideal window, it's a smart way to manage them. Stops them going over the cliff into terminal degradation.
Resets the rubber, essentially.
Pretty much. Whether bluff or management, it worked. Because shortly after that, around laps 29 to 31, wasn't it? He just closed the gap rapidly and sailed past Leclerc for P2. Looked almost easy when it finally happened.
It really did. And that just underlined the McLaren's raw pace. We saw estimates, didn't we, that in clean air, Norris might have been, what, 0.2, 0.3 seconds a lap faster than Verstappen at times?
Yeah, that underlying pace is definitely there, and that's got to be a bit worrying for Red Bull, despite the result.
It absolutely has.
Yeah.
But if Norris was clinical, we have to talk about the other side of the McLaren garage.
Yeah.
Oscar Piastri, P5. That feels like a really disappointing result, doesn't it? Especially knowing the car had that kind of pace.
Yeah.
It felt mysterious. Another one of those performance dips we've seen sometimes.
It did feel like that, a recurring theme almost. And his struggles seemed pretty consistent right through the weekend, not just in the race.
So what were the problems? What was holding him back?
Looking at the reports, it seems like two main things, both kind of linked to car feel and confidence. First, he just couldn't get the car positioned quite right in the slow corners.
Like where? Any specific examples?
Turn 11 exit was mentioned. Crucial corner, obviously, setting you up for the long straight. He apparently struggled to get the front end turned in exactly when and where he wanted it, missing the apex, even slightly.
And yeah, missing your apex in a slow corner like that, even by a few inches, it just kills your exit speed, costs you heaps of time down the straight that follows.
Exactly. Lap time just disappears. And the second issue really followed from that. It seemed to knock his confidence in the car overall. He reportedly just wasn't comfortable pushing to the absolute limit, either in the medium and high-speed corners or even under heavy braking. The feedback suggested he felt he was only driving at maybe 90, 95% of his and the car's capability.
Wow. That's a big deficit at this level.
Huge. And you saw it in the times. Norris was consistently, 2 or 3 tenths quicker in practice and qualifying trim. But in the race, that gap ballooned to almost half a second a lap sometimes.
Half a second. Ouch.
Yeah. So P5, when your teammate is P2 and potentially had Verstappen beating pace, it's just too passive. It's not good enough for the team's championship hopes.
Which brings us to the big question, and we need to be fair here, but is this becoming a pattern for Piastri? Does it suggest maybe weakness under pressure or when things aren't quite perfect?
You have to look at the evidence, right? We did see something similar towards the end of last season.
Fine.
In those later races, when the pressure ramped up, or maybe when variables changed quickly, like, say, on a sprint weekend with less practice, he seemed to struggle a bit more to adapt compared to Norris. So, yeah, the sources do float that idea, maybe adapting quickly to changing conditions, or just handling that intense psychological pressure of fighting at the very front could be an area he needs to work on.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a second. Half a second a lap is a lot. Could it have been something specific to his car this weekend? Maybe a tiny chassis flaw? Or perhaps the setup compromise needed for COTA just really didn't click with his driving style?
That's a totally fair challenge. You can never rule out some subtle issue with the car itself or, a setup that just fundamentally didn't suit him. It's possible.
It is.
But Norris seemed perfectly happy, didn't he? Got the maximum out of it, even with limited running. If we assume the cars were basically identical, that consistent gap points more towards an adaptation issue, I think. Piastri just didn't seem to be attacking the track, hunting the limits. That's why some described his drive as almost
sleep.
Sleep. Yeah, I saw that. Not aggressive enough. And the risk for McLaren is massive, isn't it? Piastri simply cannot afford to be finishing P5 when Verstappen wins. If he keeps dropping those kinds of points, that 40-point gap they need Norris to maintain or build, it'll vanish really, really quickly. He needs to be right up there, consistently P3, P4 at worst.
He has to be. Because even if the McLaren is marginally the faster car right now, Verstappen is just proving week after week that an utterly relentless driver in a very, very good car, well, he's almost unstoppable. Especially when, as one source put it quite vividly, he gets that smell of blood.
That's the Verstappen factor. Never gives up, always maximizes.
Right. Speaking of unstoppable, Max Verstappen's win. It felt pretty routine in the end, didn't it? Controlled cruising. One source used that Turkish phrase, giz.
Yeah, going leisurely, cruising along.
Yeah.
That sums it up perfectly. It was straightforward, very controlled. Once he got that little gap at the start sorted, which is really the only moment of slight vulnerability, he wasn't really challenged.
And Leclerc and Norris battling so hard behind him definitely helped there, gave him breathing space.
Absolutely. Let him manage his own race perfectly.
Okay, before we get into the whole Red Bull turnaround thing, let's just quickly run through the final top 10 for everyone listening. Consolidate that knowledge.
Good idea. So P1, Verstappen. P2 Norris,
Hmm.
P3 Leclerc, P4 was Hamilton,
Right.
P5 Piastri, P6 Russell, P7 a very good drive from Hülkenberg,
Yeah, solid again from Hull.
P8 Tsunoda, P9 Bierman recovering well, and P10 Alonso grabbing the final point.
Hamilton in P4.
Yeah.
Solid, but as one source said, felt like he was driving to himself. Like never really in that Norris-Leclerc fight, just doing his own thing perfectly.
Yeah, pretty much just managing his pace, managing the gaps, managing the tires. The most drama for him was that late race scare, wasn't it? Reported a possible front right puncture.
The slow Archer moment, they called it. Like a slow leak.
Something like that. Sounded like maybe some minor damage or a very slow leak starting. But he handled it brilliantly, barely lost any time, held P4 comfortably from Piastri. Classy drive.
Okay, now the big one. Connecting the dots.
Yeah.
Red Bull's recovery. This feels like the story coming out of COTA, doesn't it? It's not just Max anymore. Tsunoda getting P8 suggests the car itself is properly back on track.
This is the really alarming sign for everyone else, especially McLaren. We've seen it building for a few races now, but COTA seemed to confirm it. The car looks much better in those areas it struggled with earlier in the year, traction zones, bumpy tracks.
Right.
And yeah, we're hearing that this is directly linked to changes in management, technical direction under Laurent Mekies.
Right. So what's the key change? What's Mekies done differently that's yielding such clear results across the board? Because turning a car around mid-season is incredibly hard.
This was a fascinating insight from the sources. It seems Mekies has pushed for a significant philosophical shift. They're now apparently prioritizing pilot feedback much more heavily.
Pilot feedback, as in the drivers.
Exactly. Especially Verstappen's incredibly detailed, granular feedback on how the car feels, what it's doing, what he needs it to do. They're weighing that more heavily now compared to relying purely on the simulation data from the factory.
Okay, why is that pivot so crucial? Especially somewhere like COTA.
Because simulation gives you the perfect world, the theoretical optimum. It tells engineers how the car should perform in ideal conditions.
Right.
But the real track, you've got wind, changing temperatures, rubber buildup, and crucially at COTA, those damned micro bumps. The reality can be miles away from the simulation model.
So if you just develop based on the sim, you might end up with a car that's theoretically fast, but impossible for the driver to actually push to the limit in the real world.
Precisely. You're chasing an abstract number, not drivability. By really listening to Verstappen, how he sets up the suspension, how he brakes, how he manages that ride-height compromise we talked about, they're building a car that he can extract 100% from, even if maybe on paper, in the simulator, it looks a tiny fraction slower.
They're optimizing the usable performance.
That's the perfect way to put it. And Verstappen is arguably the best on the grid at finding that usable limit and living there. So instead of forcing him to adapt to a theoretically perfect but tricky car, they're making the car respond perfectly to his inputs. And it seems to be working systematically, better traction, more consistent platform. Tsunoda's P8 backs that up. It's not just Max anymore.
And that systematic improvement completely changes the look of the championship, doesn't it? Verstappen is just chipping away relentlessly at that 40-point gap to Norris.
Relentlessly is the word.
So let's look ahead. 5 races left. Mexico, Brazil, Vegas, Qatar, Abu Dhabi. What's the trajectory look like now?
It looks pretty worrying if you're McLaren. Brazil, historically, you'd almost bank that as a Verstappen win, wouldn't you? That track just suits the Red Bull so well. High-speed corners, downforce.
Yeah, seems like a Red Bull banker.
Mexico, too, is highly likely. Red Bull just has this weird, consistent advantage at high altitude.
That's the engine and aero thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Lower air density means less drag, less engine power, unless you compensate well. Red Bull always seems to nail the setup there, finding pace others can't. They often run a super slippery, low-drag package that just works.
Okay, so Mexico and Brazil look tough for McLaren. What about the others?
Vegas is the big unknown, isn't it? Mercedes won there last year. Can't just assume it's Max's. Qatar and Abu Dhabi. You'd maybe favor McLaren slightly on paper. More high-speed flowing stuff.
So the real pressure points are the next 2 races, Mexico and Brazil.
Absolutely. If Verstappen wins both of those, that 40-point lead Norris has, it could be almost gone. And psychologically, that's massive. That's when McLaren, Norris, Piastri, they might really start to feel the heat. Or, as one source put it using that Turkish phrase, they might start to "taytırmaya başlayak."
Start to tremble or panic.
Yeah, that shift in momentum, that feeling of being hunted down, that's the real danger now.
Okay, let's quickly touch on some midfield action before we wrap up. Another incident at turn 14, same place as San Antonelli. This time it was Behrman and Tsunoda.
Yeah, deja vu corner. This one looked like a classic rookie mistake from Bierman, even though he recovered really well afterward.
What was the mistake? He tried to pass?
Yeah, attempted to move up the inside, but Tsunoda never really left the door fully open. Yuki held his line, closed it slightly, and Bierman just kept pushing rather than backing out. Result: contact.
So the mistake wasn't the spin itself, because saving it on the grass was pretty spectacular.
Oh, the save was brilliant. Kept it out of the wall, minimized the damage, top stuff. No, the rookie mistake part was the initial decision. A bit too impatient, maybe misjudged how much room Tsunoda would actually give him, misjudged the slipstream effect, maybe.
Right, eagerness over judgment.
Exactly. Showed good pace again, Behrman did, but that move probably cost him P7, dropped him to P9. Just needs to learn that timing, know when a gap is really on versus when it's just wishful thinking.
Fair enough. Let's shift gears completely now. F1 last news. This Apple story. Acquiring the broadcast rights in the U.S. That's huge, isn't it?
Massive news. Confirmed now, Apple's got the U.S. rights, looks like a 5-year deal, reportedly. It's really significant because it just confirms that trend we've been seeing everywhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Major sports, top football leagues, now F1 moving lock, stock, and barrel onto streaming platforms, Netflix, Amazon, now Apple throwing big money at it.
Yeah, it feels like the final step in the Americanization of F1, maybe.
Yeah.
My slightly provocative take is this. If you're someone who worries about big tech controlling everything, well, watching F1 might start to feel like using an iPhone 17.
Huh? Explain the iPhone 17 analogy.
Meaning it'll be slick, high quality, probably very polished, but also very standardized, very controlled by one massive corporation. The narrative, the presentation, all curated through that single Apple lens, potentially.
Well, whether you buy into the control aspect or not, the shift itself is undeniable. Access changes, but maybe more importantly, the storytelling changes. Streaming giants control the whole production pipeline, cameras, commentators, features, so the narrative can be very carefully managed. That old model of regional broadcasters adding their own flavor, that's fading fast. It's a global standardized product now.
Interesting times. Okay, one final quick driver mention. Franco Colapinto finished way down, P17 or P18, I think, after starting on mediums. Tough weekend for him in that Alpine.
Yeah, very difficult debut season for him, really. The Alpine isn't giving him much to work with, is it? He shows flashes of speed, but consistency is tough in that car.
And speaking of consistency, or maybe things that affect it, I have to mention this totally irrelevant but amusing detail from one source. Apparently, Colapinto's dating a well-known Argentinian TikToker.
Oh, really? F1 gossip.
Exactly. But the source framed it almost as a cautionary tale, pointing out that, a high-profile off-track life, big distractions, that's sometimes the kind of thing that can derail young drivers. Takes away that absolute focus you need, especially when the pressure builds through a long season.
It's true. Distractions are poison in this sport. You need 100% focus, especially when you're trying to learn and develop, and especially in a car where points are hard to get. Every bit of mental energy has to go into driving.
Food for thought for young Franco. Okay, before our final thoughts, a quick bit of admin, which, frankly, I'm dreading mentioning. You're abandoning me for the next deep dive, aren't you? Off to the Malaysia MotoGP.
Afraid so. Prior commitment. Gotta be there for the bikes.
I knew it. Okay, listeners, you've been warned. Expect slightly more chaos, perhaps fewer precisely calculated 7.6 scores next time. I'll do my best to fill the substantial analytical void you're leaving behind.
I have absolute faith.
We'll see. Okay, let's wrap this up. Final provocative thought for you listening, circling back to that championship fight. Norris drove brilliantly this weekend, didn't he? Patient, fast, arguably had the quickest car overall, and yet he didn't win. And Red Bull, Verstappen, they just look ominously strong again.
And the question that raises, the one for everyone to mull over, is kind of existential for McLaren, isn't it? Are we potentially watching a repeat of history here? Could 2025 end up being looked back on like, say, Alonso in 2012? Or maybe Schumacher back in 1996?
What do you mean? What's the parallel?
Those were seasons where the driver, Alonso in a Ferrari that wasn't quite the best, Schumacher dragging an emerging Ferrari forward, drove absolutely out of their skin, flawless performances, maximizing everything, but they still lost the title. Why? Because of external factors.
The external factors for Norris right now are?
Two main things, I think. First, obviously, this relentless Red Bull resurgence, seemingly powered by that Mecky's philosophy shift we discussed. They just have momentum.
Right.
And second, the internal factor. Piastri not consistently being right up there with him. Norris needs his teammate finishing P3, P4 regularly, stealing points away from Verstappen, maybe boxing Verstappen strategically sometimes.
So the title might not be lost by Norris, but lost because the team, specifically the second car, isn't maximizing its potential week in, week out. Those points Piastri is dropping, Verstappen is hoovering them up. It compounds the pressure massively.
Exactly. It would be a tough narrative for McLaren if it plays out that way, but it's a classic F1 story, isn't it? Driver versus the machine versus the team dynamics versus the rival.
Norris is driving like a champion deserves to. But the forces against him, both external and maybe slightly internal, are mounting fast.
That's the drama unfolding right now.
Okay, we absolutely must end on the most critical point of the entire deep dive, the Papaya Lucum Pledge. My solemn vow.
Ah, yes, the pledge.
If Max Verstappen wins this championship, I have publicly committed to joining that well-known Istanbul figure, the man who distributes Turkish delight on Bas.Kadesi, and I too will hand out locum.
Turkish delight.
A noble, if slightly sticky, undertaking. A true act of sporting concession. However, this is crucial, if McLaren wins, if Norris, or hey, even Piastri pulls it off, then I will happily join the fans distributing papaya.
But it must be in the Kaduka area, Asian side of Istanbul. I am putting my foot down now. I accept the papaya duty, but I refuse point blank to travel to the outer suburbs like Beylikdüzü to do it. The papaya army needs to keep it central.
A reasonable logistical constraint for a busy podcaster. We shall await the championship outcome and the subsequent fruit or sweep distribution location with great interest.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us for this deep dive into the F1 America Grand Prix 2025.
Yeah, hope that gave you some good insights into where things stand in this fascinating title fight. We'll speak to you again soon, although next time it'll just be the host holding the fort.
Wish me luck. Take care, everyone.